Hi, everyone. Today we have Cathy Byrd. She's actually a friend that I went to high school with, and I'll tell my story, which is part of her story at the end of this interview, but this is part two. So we're going to give you a lot more details, and you can look down, hit the subscribe button if you want to stay in touch and hear more incredible stories like Cathy and her sons. And right next to it's a bell, so you can get notified when more of these incredible interviews come about. And I'll explain later too why I do those interviews and why I started doing interviews like Cathy's. And Cathy, her last name is Byrd, B-Y-R-D, and her name's Cathy with a C. She is a residential broker in the Los Angeles County and Ventura County areas of California. She has two kids and she never had aspirations of becoming a writer. But what happened was when her son was two, he started sharing some wild stories of memories of being a baseball player in the 1920s and 30s. And I also think it's pretty cool that she received her BA from UCLA, an MBA from Pepperdine University. So I want to mention that. And we'll just go right into it, Cathy. If you could tell us the journey of you and your son, and we'll add some more details and I'll add some at the end as well.
Okay. Thank you, Melissa. I love talking to you about this in particular because you really lived through it with us. Like so many years have gone by now that my kids are 13 and 16, and they were like 2 and 5 when this all started. So it's just kind of fun to have people in my life who went through it with us, because now it's kind of a distant memory that happened 10 years ago, basically 10, 11 years ago. So thank you. Yeah, and as you said, like it really did start when Christian was 2. And I'll just do a little recap. We talked about it already, but he started saying, I used to be a tall baseball player, and we would correct him and we'd say, oh yeah, one day you'll be a tall baseball player. He was 2 years old. He didn't have any way to be getting this information he was sharing with us when he started getting real specific with details about a prior lifetime. So basically he said, I was tall like daddy, like trying to come get us to listen to what he was trying to say to us. And finally, we kind of caught on to it, that he was really referring to a prior lifetime as an adult, playing baseball in the 1920s and 30s. And all the details he shared with us, it started out slowly with little clues here and there to the era. He would say, oh, when I was a tall baseball player, I used to stay in hotels almost every night. We were like, And I said, oh, did you fly on airplanes? And he said, no, mostly trains, and meanwhile, he had no reference for trains, even at that time, and no way to know that baseball players would even stay in hotels, because he was so young at the time. And so as he shared more and more details with us, being Christian, reincarnation was not something that we were really familiar with or considering at the time. But I did reach out to my pastor, and we put kind of all of the information together that our son Christian had shared with us. And the pastor responded by saying, like, maybe it's an unwelcome spirit kind of thing, like possession or something like this. So that kind of, not that it scared us, but it wasn't like something we were willing to really go with. So I just got real curious, and I started researching on the internet, like trying to figure out, did other kids have similar experiences? We can't be the only ones, right? That our son is just coming out with these stories about playing baseball in the 1920s. So sure enough, I was able to find a woman named Carol Bowman, and she really became like a mentor for me. And she really kind of held my hand through this whole process, just to be calm. And if he would talk about it, like not to get upset or not to be too, prying or asking questions. She kind of gave me the commonalities between kids that would share these past life memories. So when kids are sharing memories about a past life, like it's very real, talk, like they're almost like adult-like in their tone. It's not like make-believe, and generally this is what we found to be true too, was that he would do this right before bed, late at night, as he was falling asleep. He would just come out with something out of the blue about it, or when he would wake up. So even waking up from a nap, like when he said the thing about, I used to stay in hotels almost every night, it was right when he woke up from a nap. So we kind of like got the information from her, and her advice to us was to show him photographs from the era that we had kind of defined based on the things he had told us. Like we had another incident where we were in Boston because we put a video of him on YouTube that got discovered by Adam Sandler. And we got, they reached out to us and said, we'd love to put him in this movie in a baseball playing role. He was 2 years old. So within like 2 weeks, without even meeting him, they put us on a plane to Cape Cod. So we flew to Boston, and he filmed this movie with Adam Sandler, and a very like serendipitous thing happened. And the Yankees were playing the Red Sox when we were there. So we got to go to that game. And Christian happened to see this giant picture of Babe Ruth on the wall. And it didn't even occur to me. I knew who Babe Ruth was. That was probably one of the only baseball players I would have recognized in a picture. But he got so emotionally distraught by seeing this picture. He had this little bat and he's like, I don't like him. He was mean to me, and this was after he had already said some weird things where we were already like, what is this? So we kind of realized from the things he was saying that it was during that era of Babe Ruth. So what Carol Bowman suggested we do was show him photographs from that era, like picture a Babe Ruth's team and say like, hey, do you recognize any of these people? See if he can identify names. So we did show him the picture and he pointed to Lou Gehrig and said, that's me. And I had to look up on the internet to see who the guy was, but it was Lou Gehrig, who, we mostly associate Lou Gehrig's name with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. So initially I was like, oh no, not the guy who died of ALS, like it wasn't like something that I was excited about. And also when your child comes to you and says they were another person, it's actually very disconcerting too, right? Like you really just want it to all go away. And thankfully what Carol told me too, she shared with me that the kids that they had, they've done research on these kids since the 60s. There's a medical school in Virginia that has documented like 3,000 cases from all over the world of these kids between the ages of like 2 until about school age, like 5 or 6. They have these very specific memories of a past life. But the good news, which was great news to me at the time, was that when the kids do kind of assimilate into this lifetime, school age and get their own identity, that this stuff kind of dissipates and disappears, which is wonderful. So, and what I did find out too, is there are a lot of kids that come to this lifetime with skills that were acquired in another lifetime. So it sounds strange, but, recently we did an interview with a magazine in the UK, and a brand new story just came out. And there's this little boy who knew how to knit, and his parents were like, how do you know how to knit? And it was like, well, I used to do this all the time, and he had all these stories to share. So it was like a skill that was attained in a prior lifetime that carries over, right? I mean, knitting is pretty specific. Playing the piano, we see prodigies all the time, right? So Christian had, definitely like this affinity obsession with baseball from the age of 2. He wore a baseball uniform every day, even to school. He insisted on wearing like cleats and the high socks, and he was obsessed with it. He's a lefty, which Lou Gehrig was also a lefty. Still to this day, he plays baseball competitively. He's about to go into high school in about a year, and still he's a left-handed pitcher too. So the baseball theme has carried on, but thankfully, this past life memory thing has become kind of a distant thing for us. But the reason that we keep sharing the story is because we feel like it can help people, give people faith, like you do with reducing anxiety and stress, and just, sharing with people that our souls do survive death, that, these connections, this love in this lifetime carries on beyond our physical existence in a body.
Thank you. I was just on mute so that everyone, when I interview, I just feel like it's the storyteller who tells the story, and that's what's most important, not so much me interviewing back and forth. So a few questions that I have already, but before my questions, I'm going to explain, if you don't mind showing your book, how can people reach out to you if they need to, what your website is, things like that. I'm going to explain on my end, like Cathy already mentioned, that I help people with anxiety, fear, doom, gloom. And in this part 2, we're going to get into a lot more detail. But stories like this, I hope, help you who are listening with your loss. If you've had loss, you understand that life extends beyond this lifetime. And I've got that quote from Cathy. You could say it better than I have, but she said that in other interviews so eloquently. I think it was on The Doctors where you said something like that. So I hope you'll share that again. And so I'll put how you can contact Cathy in the description, how you can contact me. So I hope you can show us your book and a little bit about your book. If you could open it up and show us the back and front, because I think it's beautiful art, and how people can reach you on your website for real estate or things like that.
Okay.
But my first question is going to be, did you or your husband play baseball? Is there any reason he should know about baseball, your son?
Right. So that's a very good question. And no, we were not baseball people. His father is from Germany. So he's definitely like, just getting him to go to a baseball game is rough. So this was not something that we were super excited about, that our son was obsessed with baseball. And we've kind of learned the sport along with him as as he's grown up playing travel baseball. And it's been fun. We have tons of, our relationships, friendships, our social life around it has been really, really fun. And even this whole Lou Gehrig thing, he got bullied over it a bit when he was little. People don't understand it. They didn't necessarily read the book or know what the story is. And it does sound crazy if some lady's trying to say, my son used to be Lou Gehrig, but without knowing all the details and why we're telling the story. I get it that people are trying to process it. So, kids still kind of joke about it with him, but he has a good sense of humor about it. And he has a lot of respect for Lou Gehrig. Like, he's learned a lot about Lou Gehrig through the process of, telling the story and the things he said when he was little. He doesn't have perfect memory of the actual recall because he was so young at the time. So like you said, we have to go do these interviews like with the doctors or Dr. Oz we did last year. And it's hard. So I always tell him, just be authentic and say what you remember. Like, you don't have to be standing there saying, I was Lou Gehrig, So we try to do our best just to tell the story authentically from the place that we're at right now, which is far beyond that place that we were in 10 years ago, trying to figure it all out. And I'll show, this is the book that I wrote. It's called The Boy Who Knew Too Much. It came out in 2017, and the hardcover, and then the paperback was just released not too long ago. The first half of the book really goes into detail on Christian's past life memories as he related them to us and how we dealt with it from when he was 2 until he was about 5 or 6. And then the second half of the story is really like my quest to figure it out and to really go deeper with it and explore, people who are alive today who could kind of confirm or deny the things that came out. And in the end, like, I think all of that happened to convince me that, yes, this is real. And it's not a fluke that he happened to know all these things. So yeah. And in the inside, we have a lot of pictures. He's had some really cool baseball experiences. He got to throw a first pitch for the Dodgers. He's gotten to go to spring training with Tommy Lasorda. This picture on the front is from a first pitch he did when he had just turned 4. So it's been a blessing in our lives, and we have been able to help people, which is great. A lot of people read the book and they feel, at peace with the loss of a loved one, like you were saying. And then a lot of people also have had similar experiences in childhood where they have this feeling of deja vu or of like some kind of memory a soul memory, basically. And so it's really kind of helps people to connect with that part of them. So yeah, I feel honored to be able to share the story and to share the story of Lou Gehrig, which is really great.
Thank you. I have a question about a series of coincidences I noticed in your book, which, first of all, how do people find your book?
Okay, so it's available pretty much anywhere books are sold. So Amazon, Target, Barnes and Noble, some smaller bookstores as well. So, and on my website, like, you can go to Cathy-Byrd.com, and there's more information and videos, some fun things there too.
What I noticed about your book, I don't know if this is all in your book or just a few things that you've told me, is, and this is how I think a lot of people can either relate because they understand this already, or moving forward, listening to you relate in the future, these series of coincidences. One is, I remember how did someone happen to give your son a little baseball bat or a baseball outfit or even some plates? I think there were some gift plates someone gave, all these little
Yeah.
things that I noticed, wait, this doesn't make sense. These things obviously it's like your son was a magnet for baseball. So I want to ask about those stories. And then also the story, and I don't know if this is in your book, how it's unheard of to get a book published without an agent, and how that happened too was very divine, as if you're getting
Yeah.
a little push from beyond.
From beyond. Yeah. And we had so many synchronicities, like events that happen in the book that I relay in the book, but also I'll give you the little book publishing story as an example. We were in Connecticut there to meet people who knew Lou Gehrig and his mother when they were alive. And we got snowed in. So while we were there, we got these airline credits, $800. And I used that while I was snowed in a hotel in Connecticut to book a writer's workshop in Maui with Wayne Dyer with Hay House. And it was kind of this thing where if you go there and you win, then your book can get published through Hay House, which is a spiritual publisher. So it was kind of like a really big goal would be like, wow, that would be amazing. So the following June, we went to Maui and Wayne Dyer was speaking. And he's talking about this book that he's working on. And it was called Memories of Heaven. And it was about children connecting with spirits from beyond, about coming back with past life memories, seeing angels. It was something he was just working on in that moment. Like, here's a guy who's written 30 books, probably more. And he was writing a book exactly about the topic of my book. So we were lucky enough to meet him. And sadly, he passed away like 3 months later, but he had introduced my story to Hay House. And so that's how I got the publishing deal. But we had so many synchronicities too around Lou Gehrig. Like an example, I was writing my book in Cooperstown, New York, which is where I did a lot of the research and a lot of the validating of the facts that came through. And that's where the Baseball Hall of Fame is. And so I had been there for a month and we were getting ready to head back. We had tons of stuff. And I'm at the airport and they say, oh, you can't fly home. You have to stay here because there's a storm in Charlotte coming, and meanwhile, like weather doesn't show any storm coming. So the guys in front of me are trying to get to San Francisco. And I hear them say, well, we'll just take the last flight out of the day. It goes to Tampa. So then I said, well, I'll go where those guys are going. Like, let me get away from the storm. And then in the morning we can fly to LA. So we go to Tampa, we get in like 11 o'clock. We're in the van, ready to go to the hotel, and the Yankees game is on the radio. So the guy says, oh yeah, the Yankees are in town. They're going to be here tomorrow too. And I thought, wow, how cool is that? Because we never got to go to a Yankees game in New York because I was so busy and on a deadline with my book. So we get our flight extended so we can stay for the Yankees game. And we show up at the game and we walk in and there's this big picture of Lou Gehrig on the wall. And they're auctioning it off. Like, we happen to go in this entrance, they're auctioning it off. Of course, we're going to like enter the drawing. Then we go to the game and we walk into the stadium and I kid you not, on the big screen is Lou Gehrig, and it's Lou Gehrig Appreciation Day at Tampa Bay, where we're not supposed to be, right? We're supposed to be in LA at this time. It's Lou Gehrig Appreciation Day. It's ALS Day. They've got people in wheelchairs and we're sitting there with our mouths open. Like, the minute we walk in, I have video of it and everything. Lou Gehrig on the screen saying, today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth, and then Evan Longoria hands Christian a ball. Like, he gets a ball. Like, there were so many amazing things. 7th inning, they do the drawing of the Lou Gehrig photo. We win. So I have this picture of us standing on the field after the game. It was also like the day where the kids get to run the bases after the game. So he got to go on the field. And there we are standing there with our Lou Gehrig picture that we just won. And then we fly home the next day. So it's like the universe kept delivering these messages. And I think the final chapter of my book is called A Wink from the Universe. And I love to use that because we've all had those moments, like those synchronistic, magical moments that just kind of confirm, like, yep, you're on the right track. We're behind you. Like, this is where you're supposed to be. And yes, you're supposed to be sharing this story. And that's just one story. There's more, there's just synchronicity after synchronicity. And even the fact how you and I reconnected And you've been really instrumental too in helping me to share the story over the past, 10 years. When I get cold feet, like you were there to kind of go, you can do this. So thank you.
So my little part, I still have a couple more questions. My little part in this is that I knew of Cathy in high school. She was really well known. I think you were a homecoming queen or a prince at week queen.
Something like that.
Like everyone knew Cathy because she's so sweet and kind and beautiful.
Aww.
And next door, I go to a party right next door, and there she is. Oh, I know Cathy. And she comes to my backyard, and then she starts emailing. This is my part of the story that I probably never told you, because there's my part. And she's emailing her son, the baseball player. And I'm thinking, I don't know anything about baseball. Okay, I look at these videos. It's getting on YouTube for probably about a year. And I'm like, okay, so we're in touch. Pretty cool. She's sending out emails about her son being this baseball prodigy. And then around that time, I started studying the Bible, the Torah, and I exchanged spiritual CDs with someone. And it was a rabbi who's very blunt in talking about that the Torah hints at reincarnation. I thought, what? I know about reincarnation. I thought that's only people in India or other countries talked about. And you've since taught me that American parents really don't listen as much. I think they're starting to. So that was part of your issue, is we don't know what our kids are saying. But in India and other places, they clearly know this stuff. And so when Cathy wrote something like, I know nothing about baseball. My husband's a German immigrant. He knows nothing about baseball. I wrote back to her at the risk of sounding like a crazy person. I don't remember what I wrote, but something I could probably find the email. Cathy, do you think your son is talking about a past life? Because I'm listening to this religious CD that he's talking about. She said, you're only the fourth person I've told. I think it was your husband, a friend, your mother, and then me. And so then eventually, like Cathy said, she's writing it down and keeping notes, and she goes off to Bali and puts it into a book because she needed to be alone and have her space. And then I help edit it. So I'm, in the big paragraph of people that she thanks, because she's such a grateful person, the kind of people in the book she's thanking, but I edited it twice. And I think I could have added that in the Torah, that what we say is that some angel, I don't know if we know their name or
Angel
not.
Layla.
Will you tell us that story?
Angel Layla. So yeah, I have that story in there. I may have found that story because of you. I can't even recall.
I think so.
It's all a blur. But yeah, in the Talmud, which is, like from that time, the angel Layla is supposedly, is this angel that comes to the womb when the baby's in the womb, and puts her hand over her mouth and over the mouth of the child and says, shh. And all of the prior memories are forgotten. And that is supposedly the little indentation we have over our lip, our top lip. So, and I love that comes from the Jewish tradition, that was a story that was told for many years. And in Christianity, as I researched it more, I found out that there were stories of reincarnation in the Bible that were taken out in the 4th century. So, basically when the entire Bible was rewritten. So that really it relieved a lot of my Christian guilt over it, knowing that a lot of that was political, why they would remove that from the Bible, anything about rebirth or reincarnation.
And I think also what people are skeptical about is, oh, sure, it's Cleopatra, someone famous, Lou Gehrig. And what I've come to learn because of you, because of learning about you and your son and looking into it, it's that probably a lot of our souls remember something, but some of us remember much more clearly. And that is because something traumatic, like Lou Gehrig, it could have been the fame or the ALS, the way he left this world too early. You can find stories of children in 9/11 seeing themselves fall from the building. You can even, in my theory, they never reached back to me, Cathy, but I probably told you years ago, I reached out to the trans community, emailing them to say, because you can find this online, a little boy, white skin, remembers the life of a woman named Anne, who was in a Chicago fire. So I realized, if reincarnation is true, whatever it is, soul memory, we don't understand. Cathy and I would never say we understand what it is or proselytize in any way, but for a little light-skinned boy to remember the life of a dark-skinned woman in Chicago fire, and he knew her name was Anne, he knew everything. So I started thinking, I need to tell the trans community this so they understand maybe they just have a stronger memory of being the other sex in another life. And if they just knew this, I feel like it's therapeutic.
Right. And it is. And here's another synchronicity. If you recall, when you had me come speak at your meeting and then afterwards I went to get a pedicure, and I sat next to Bruce Jenner, well, Caitlyn Jenner, and I got to share my story and my book with her. And I gave her a copy of the book, and she was going to give it to her own mother, because she said, I've always felt like a woman in my soul, and that, so you were onto something there. And it's so funny that you're connected to that story of when I actually met Caitlyn Jenner. So I love that.
And the other part of the story is that was in my soul too, because I knew that Caitlyn Jenner lives in our approximate area. And you had told me, so what Cathy did was, I was asked if I knew anyone that was an interesting speaker. I said, oh, my friend Cathy, because this was, the person requesting this was in Leisure Village. So a lot of the people in the audience, I think there were about 40 people in the audience, were in their 80s, 90s, even close to 100. And I thought, what a beautiful concept for us to be older and understand we live on. Maybe we've been here before, but like Cathy's taught us, love doesn't die and it transcends lifetimes.
Right.
What a perfect audience. So a bunch of synchronicities, two of them I can think of is one is
yeah.
I've always wanted Bruce Jenner, Caitlyn Jenner to know this information because she's so out there, and it helps explain that this is not a weird thing. This is the soul understanding something. And Cathy told me, because she gave this lecture, the book was in the car, she sees Caitlyn Jenner and hands her the book. Now, quickly thereafter, I was in Westlake Village, and this was when masks were first starting. I didn't have a mask. And Caitlyn Jenner was in front of me, and I said, oh, I don't have a mask. I was at Starbucks in Westlake Village. And she turned to me and said, I got your back. So I realized, okay, she's so friendly. So I go outside, follow her to her car. And I briefly mentioned you met my friend Cathy, and I wanted to talk about reincarnation. I just couldn't. I felt like she's going to think I'm a weirdo. And I wanted to relate that. It wouldn't come out of my mouth. I thought, oh, she's going to think I'm just another fan weirdo. So I'm just not going to say it. And I just couldn't say it. But those are the things. The other thing was in the audience was Brian Weiss's, can you say that part?
I was going to say that his cousin was there, and she was lovely. So Brian Weiss was like the pioneer of this whole past life regression thing. He was a psychiatrist, and he wrote the book, Many Lives, Many Masters. And it was so lovely to meet her there. Like, it really is amazing. And then from that meeting, I also went and did another book club meeting with someone who was there too.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Maureen. Was it Maureen?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah. So that was fun too. So it's amazing how I feel like messages come to people too when they need to hear it, and grief is a huge thing, and understanding death and our souls and our connections that we have while we're here, and what happens beyond that, like when someone leaves us, right? Is it over? So I feel like, especially with COVID, like it's such a necessary thing for us to really deeply understand in a deep way, that our souls survive death, and that love can surpass one lifetime. It's just such a critical part of the puzzle, I think, right now. And for everyone who's struggling, we've all now had people who we've lost, I think, in the last couple of years. It's just been crazy. Every day we hear of a new person that's passing away. So I just feel like very grateful to have this firsthand story that I can share. And then I also feel like there's so many other stories, like what you speak with people with near-death experiences, all of these kids that you've mentioned that have these stories. So I think many times these messages come to us through the mouths of babes, right? They're innocent, they're pure, and we have to listen. It's our job to listen and share these stories too.
So beautiful. I just love the story. We could speak for another hour, but we should probably end pretty soon. But if you need to reach me, like I said, hit subscribe, hit the bell next to that, and I'll put chapters. So if there's an interesting part that you want to share with a friend, you just click on the words under us speaking, and you'll notice these chapters will pop up. So you can send just a part to a friend. And if you know anyone who's had an experience, their child or a friend who's had a spiritually transformational experience. I mean, you can see on my channel called Growth Factor, there are people who saw grandma, the soul, go back almost like a hologram and greet the husband that they lost 60 years prior. And I have someone who tells synchronistic stories. So all kinds of spiritually transformational stories. And I have some of my own that someone just reached out to me that he wants to interview. So I'm going to talk about some of my wild stories too that I've probably told Cathy. But my email is growthfactor.org@gmail.com. I'll put it in the description. Cathy, what's your website?
Mine is just my name, Cathy Byrd. So it's Cathy-Byrd.com, or you can just Google it. And there's lots of fun videos too to watch.
And it's CATHY and then a dash BYRD.
YRD. Correct.
And I do have more questions, but I feel like that's for part 3, or people can
Yeah.
get the book, both of those options, and I'll put all that in the description. Anything else you can think of? I think my
Yeah,
last
I mean, a
question.
lot of people ask about the movie.
Oh,
So I
wow.
did sell the movie rights back in 2017 to 20th Century Fox, and we were literally 2 weeks away from shooting the movie. And they pulled the plug on it temporarily because they couldn't get an actress to play the part at that moment. And so another serendipitous, very cool thing is I was able to get the rights back right before the pandemic hit. And so it will still be a movie, but it's a little bit in the future, which it's kind of lovely because my kids will be a little older. And, it is always scary too, to put your kids kind of in the spotlight with such a controversial story. So I feel like that was a blessing too. So yes, it will be a movie, but not immediately. And that's the update on that.
Thank you. Thank
Sure.
you. And we can keep updated on that too, maybe in a part 3, if you ever want to do that.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think if there's anything else to talk about. I think the last question I have is, how can people in America especially be more open? Because you didn't understand at first what your son was saying. You thought he's just telling wild stories. Is there any tips you have for people how to listen? Maybe it's a grandchild or a neighbor or a babysitter that's hearing something.
Right. So I would say, yeah, especially parents. I have a lot of parents reach out to me that say like, oh my gosh, my daughter talks about this house she used to live in, this yellow house, and how do I find out more? So it's really the same advice Carol gave me, is just to listen, to also be very aware and alert at those sleepy times. And not to probe too much, but just let kids naturally come out with it, not to be shocked, not to, be like, and then what happened? Like you don't want to lead them either, like leading the witness. So I just think if we can all be more open and really just know that our children come to this world like really to teach us. That's one thing that I really believe.
Absolutely. Thank you for your wisdom, Cathy. I appreciate it. Like I said, I hope people who are listening right now with your loss, with your anxiety, stress, and maybe some depression, to understand that this world is just an earth school and there's something else beyond now. And Cathy is, in a way, this is never provable, I know, but I feel like she offers some proof or a glimpse that there's more to this life than we understand. And there's more to this life in something else beyond, which can be very soothing.
Yes. And thank you for doing the work that you do, Melissa, because I'm so intrigued too by the interviews that you do and the people that you meet. Thank you.
Hope you all enjoy the other interviews as well, which are below. And thank you, Cathy. Thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.